When a compassionate woman opens her door to a stranded single father and his little girl during a storm, she has no idea that her act of kindness will ripple into something far greater. It was nearly midnight when the storm rolled in over the town of Pinegrove, battering windows and swallowing streets in sheets of rain. The wind howled like a grieving soul, and thunder clapped hard enough to shake the ground. In her modest yet warm townhouse on Alder Lane, 29-year-old Clara Whitman, a publishing assistant with tired eyes and a heart far bigger than her paycheck, curled up on her couch with a book and a blanket. Just as she turned a page, a soft but urgent knock startled her. She paused, heart racing. Another knock. Cautiously she approached the door and peeked through the peephole. A tall man, soaked, beard-shadowed, probably in his late 30s, stood holding the hand of a tiny girl no older than 5. Her pink jacket was drenched, her small face pale beneath wet curls, and her lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry," the man said when Clara opened the door an inch. "Our car broke down. We just need a safe place for a few hours. I have money. I'll pay, please." Clara glanced at the girl, then at the man's eyes, tired, desperate, but kind. Against every instinct her cautious mother had ever instilled in her, she unlatched the door. "Come in," she said. The man ducked inside, gently guiding the girl past Clara's doorway. His soaked coat dripped onto the floor and the little girl clung to his leg. Clara quickly retrieved towels and ushered them into the living room, still trying to process what was happening. "I'm Clara," she said hesitantly. "You can warm up here. I've got cocoa, maybe a dryer for your clothes." "I'm Evan. This is Mira," the man replied softly. "Thank you, we didn't know where else to go." Evan appeared to be around 38, broad-shouldered, with thoughtful eyes and a calm tone. Mira was small, maybe 6, and when she smiled at Clara after sipping warm cocoa, it lit up the room. Her dark eyes sparkled with wonder, and her curly hair puffed out like a halo once dry. Clara's living room was simple, hand-me-down furniture, books stacked high, and warm lighting from a vintage lamp. She watched as Evan gently brushed Myra's hair, whispering stories that made the little girl giggle. They didn't seem dangerous. In fact, they seemed grateful, real good. Clara didn't ask more questions, at least not yet. Later that night, after Mira had curled up on the couch with a fleece blanket, Clara offered Evan her guest room. He refused. "She should take the bed." "I'll take the floor," he insisted. "You both can take the bed. I'll stay on the couch," Clara said, folding her arms. He chuckled lightly, surprised. "You're trusting. That's rare." "I'm not stupid," Clara said with a smirk, "but I have a good gut, and she's a kid. That tells me enough." As the house settled into quiet, Clara found herself unable to sleep. Her thoughts spun. Who was this man? What kind of situation were they really in? She didn't sense danger, only a story left untold. In the dark, Mira whispered through the hallway. "Miss Clara." Clara sat up. "Yes, sweetie. Thanks for being nice." Clara's chest tightened. Of course. It wasn't the kind of night she expected, but something in her gut told her that this wasn't just a random encounter. It was the beginning of something far more unexpected. Morning came with golden light filtering through the curtains and the smell of cinnamon and butter. Clara, in her oversized Keep Calm and Read On t-shirt and leggings, stood flipping pancakes in the kitchen. Evan entered quietly, freshly showered, wearing one of Clara's oversized flannel shirts she insisted he borrow. It barely fit his broad frame but made her grin. "I hope you like pancakes," she said. "I think Mira might love you forever," he replied. The kitchen filled with small laughter. Mira emerged soon after, hair braided by Clara, now wearing clean spare clothes, child-sized pajamas Clara found from an old neighbor's forgotten box. They ate together like a family. Evan offered small truths. His car had died on the way to some new job. Myra's mom had passed 2 years ago. They were traveling light, chasing a fresh start. Clara didn't pry. But every now and then, she caught Evan looking at her like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Later that afternoon, while tidying up, Clara noticed something tucked beneath the couch, likely fallen from Evan's bag. She picked it up, a leather folder with a logo she didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it. Inside, a resume. Impressive. Ivy League education, international consulting experience. But what made her freeze was the letter, stamped and signed. "Dear Mr. Evan Harper, we are pleased to welcome you as the incoming Chief Executive Officer of Grayfield & Company." Clara stared at it in shock. Her heart pounded. The man sleeping in her guest room wasn't just some drifter with a story. He was the new CEO of one of the largest firms in the region. She slowly set the folder back down, trying to make sense of it. Why hadn't he told her? Why pretend to be someone else? But then she remembered how he looked at Mira, how he refused the bed, how he asked for nothing but shelter. Maybe that was the point. Clara didn't confront Evan right away. The folder sat hidden in her drawer as her mind spiraled between disbelief and curiosity. That evening, she brewed tea while Evan and Mira sat on the floor playing a memory game Clara had forgotten she even owned. "Do you always help strangers?" Evan asked casually. Clara hesitated. "No, but something about you both." "I don't know, I trusted my instincts." He smiled. "You have good instincts." She studied his face, noting again the calm dignity he carried. He wasn't pretending to be someone else, he was simply choosing not to disclose everything. And oddly, Clara respected that. Mira looked up and announced she had won again, laughing with triumph. Evan cheered her on, his pride unmistakable. He was clearly a devoted father, grounded and patient. Whatever his job title was, it didn't change how he behaved in Clara's living room. Later, as Mira dozed off on the couch, Evan looked at Clara and said, "Thank you for not asking too many questions. Most people would." She nodded slowly. "You seem like the kind of person who would tell me when it matters." He held her gaze as if weighing that very moment. The following morning brought a rare winter sun that spilled warmth into Clara's home. She offered to let Mira draw in her study while she and Evan cleaned out the basement. Mostly an excuse to avoid the awkward silence growing between them. As they carried boxes and dust-covered holiday decor, Evan paused by a box labeled "Mom." Clara noticed his jaw tighten. "My mom passed away last year," she said softly. "Cancer." Evan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "My wife died in an accident." Mira was 3. They stood in silence, grief now a quiet guest in the room. "You get used to pretending you're okay for everyone else," Clara said, voice hushed. Evan nodded. "It's easier when someone sees past the act." In that dusty space surrounded by forgotten memories, their walls came down a little more. Clara realized that the job title she'd discovered didn't matter in moments like these. Beneath all roles and identities, he was just a man who'd lost someone, just like her. For the first time, Evan looked at her like he saw more than a kind hostess, like maybe she understood something no one else had. That afternoon, Clara took Mira on a short walk around the block once the weather had cleared. They stopped for hot chocolate, and Mira told Clara about the stars she used to count with her mom. "She said when someone loves you and they're gone, they become a star you can talk to," Mira said, sipping her drink. Clara felt a lump in her throat. "She sounds like she was very wise." Mira nodded with the serene seriousness only young children could carry. "She said Daddy's heart is full of stars, but sometimes he forgets they're there." Back at the house, Clara watched Evan watching them from the window. Something had shifted. He had let her in, even if only a little. And Mira had begun to trust her in the most innocent, pure way. Over dinner, they all laughed like they had known each other longer than just a couple of days. Evan began to share more. Small details about his favorite books, how he'd moved around too much in the past, how Mira kept him grounded. Still, he never mentioned work, never mentioned his position. Clara, too, kept his secret to herself, unsure why, only that it felt like the right thing to do. On the third day, as the weather improved, Evan announced they would be leaving soon. "I found a mechanic, should be done tomorrow." Clara's heart sank, though she knew this was always temporary. Still, the thought of waking up without Myra's giggle or Evan's quiet presence left a hollow echo inside her. "I wish I could repay you," Evan said. "You opened your home. You trusted me. That doesn't happen often." Clara shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't do this expecting something in return." He studied her. "That's rare too." She shrugged, smiling softly. "Well, maybe the world needs more rare people." The way he looked at her then, like he wanted to say something, like something important had reached the edge of his tongue, made her heart race. But he didn't say it. Instead, he helped wash the dishes, tucked Mira in, read one last bedtime story. In the quiet afterward, Clara sat on her couch, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. Maybe she wouldn't see him again. Maybe this was just a moment in passing. But it had already changed her in ways she couldn't explain. Evan and Mira left just after breakfast the next morning. Mira hugged Clara tightly and whispered, "You're my second favorite person now." Clara laughed. "Who's first?" "My daddy, duh," Mira replied with a giggle. Evan stood beside the car, his hand extended. Clara ignored it and gave him a quick, heartfelt hug. He hugged her back, warm and steady. "Thank you," he said. "You reminded me that not all kindness needs to be earned," and then they were gone. Clara returned to her house, now far too quiet, and went back to her routines. But nothing felt the same. Her heart held an ache she hadn't expected. 2 days later, at her publishing firm's quarterly meeting, Clara sat flipping through reports when the executive director cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new CEO, Mr. Evan Harper." She froze. He walked in, confident, composed, in a tailored suit. He scanned the room, and for a fleeting second their eyes met. Evan smiled, but said nothing about Pine Grove, about Mira, about the pancakes or the memory games. He simply said, "It's a pleasure to be here." And Clara realized he wasn't just a man passing through her life. He was now part of her world. Clara sat frozen in her chair as Evan addressed the staff. He stood at the front of the conference room with polished confidence, a commanding presence softened only slightly by the warmth in his voice. The Evan Harper she had hosted in her home, tired, gentle, slightly guarded, was now in a crisp navy suit, confidently outlining his vision for the company's next chapter. Her colleagues around the table murmured with curiosity and admiration. None of them knew him like she did. They didn't know how he tucked Mira in, or how he cradled his grief with quiet dignity. Clara stared down at her notepad, afraid her face might betray the storm inside her. After the meeting, Evan moved through the room shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. When he finally reached her, he paused. "Clara Whitman," he said with professional formality, "I'm looking forward to working with you." His tone gave away nothing, no hint of recognition, no acknowledgement, but his eyes lingered on hers with something deeper. A silent pact. She nodded. "Likewise, Mr. Harper." As he moved on, Clara realized something important. He wasn't hiding, he was waiting, testing her silence, trusting her discretion, and in that moment she silently returned the favor. Word spread quickly through the office about the new CEO. Clara overheard whispers in the break room and subtle speculation in the elevator. Everyone wanted to know what kind of leader Evan Harper would be. "He seems sharp," someone said. "Kind of mysterious, don't you think?" another added. "No social media, barely any public background." Clara kept her head down, staying quiet. Inside, though, her mind was a whirl of unspoken thoughts. She watched Evan move through the building, always composed, always calm. He remembered names, listened intently, and asked smart questions, but never once did he slip and reference Pinegrove or the stormy night they'd shared. Still, Clara couldn't help but notice the subtle glances. When he passed her in the hallway, their eyes would meet for a heartbeat too long. A smile would flicker, a memory would hover between them. It was like sharing a secret with someone in a crowded room, intimate yet untouchable. That night, as Clara sat alone in her apartment, she found herself smiling as she folded the laundry. The flannel shirt Evan had borrowed was still in her closet. She hadn't washed it yet. Maybe she didn't want to, because the quiet, soaked stranger in the storm hadn't disappeared. He had simply stepped into another world and brought her with him. One afternoon, Clara received an email with the subject line, "Lunch." It was from Evan. It was direct, simple, and without explanation. For a brief moment her heart thudded in her chest. She replied with a one-word answer, "Sure." They met at a quiet cafe just down the street from the office. When she arrived, Evan stood to greet her, not as a CEO, but as the man who once helped dry his daughter's curls in her living room. "I hope this isn't awkward," he said once they sat down. She laughed softly. "A little late for that." He chuckled. "Fair." There was a long pause before he said, "I wanted to thank you again, properly. You didn't just give us a place to stay, you gave us peace. For a few days Mira felt safe." Clara's eyes softened. "You both did the same for me. You reminded me what it means to connect, without pretense." He nodded. "I didn't tell you who I was because I wanted to be seen without the title. And you were," she said. "You still are." For the rest of lunch they talked like old friends. Work barely came up. Instead they swapped childhood stories, favorite books, and tiny moments of real life. It was the most honest conversation Clara had had in years. Later that week, Clara received a manila envelope at her desk, unmarked. Inside was a folded piece of paper, construction paper, with a child's scribbled artwork in bold crayon strokes. It was a drawing of three people, Mira, Evan, and Clara, holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. A small dog floated nearby, even though Clara didn't own one. Above their heads, in crooked letters, Mira had written, "Miss Clara is family now." Clara pressed the drawing to her chest and blinked back tears. The innocence of the message undid her. There was no explanation, no follow-up note, but she didn't need one. Mira remembered, and Evan, he had shared it on purpose. She pinned the drawing to the inside of her desk cabinet where no one could see it but her. It became her secret source of warmth, a gentle reminder that the best connections often came unannounced. Later that day, Evan passed her desk. As usual, he didn't stop, but as he walked by he tapped his chest lightly over his heart, then pointed once at hers, a silent thank you, a promise, a thread still weaving between them. A few weeks later, Clara found herself assigned to a high-level project team, one directly overseen by Evan. It wasn't favoritism. Her manager made it clear that her talent had been recognized. Still, the proximity brought a wave of uncertainty. They worked well together. Clara offered clear insights and Evan gave her room to speak. In meetings they kept it professional. Outside of them, the space between them buzzed with unspoken familiarity. One Friday evening, as they walked out of the building at the same time, Evan turned and said, "You've grown quiet lately." Clara shrugged. "Just trying to figure out where I fit." He paused, then said softly, "You already do." They stood beneath the streetlight, neither ready to walk away. Finally Clara asked, "Do you miss her?" "All the time," he said. "But Mira, she sees you, really sees you, and that means something." Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to ask what exactly it meant to him, to Mira, to this strange, delicate thread between them, but instead she just said, "I see you too," and that was enough for now. 2 months had passed since Evan's quiet arrival at the company, and since that stormy night on Clara's doorstep. She had grown into her new role, increasingly visible, increasingly confident. But one thing had remained unchanged, the silent understanding between her and Evan. Then, during an executive planning meeting, Evan did something unexpected. "Clara," he said, addressing the room, "I'd like you to co-lead the development initiative. Your perspective has been invaluable." All eyes turned to her. Clara's heart skipped. She wasn't senior. She wasn't even sure she belonged at that table. But Evan's gaze didn't waver. There was no favoritism in his tone, just genuine recognition. "Yes," she replied quietly. Then louder, "I'd be honored." Afterward in the hallway she caught up to him. "Why me?" "Because you lead the way people should," Evan said. "Not for attention, not for status. You make space for others, you see people." She didn't say anything then, but something shifted. His respect wasn't based on what she had done that stormy night. It was who she was every day that mattered now, and perhaps who they were becoming together. A few days later, Clara received an unexpected call. "Hi," Myra's voice rang through the phone. "Daddy says I can invite whoever I want to my birthday. I want you to come." "Please," Clara laughed. "Of course I'd love to." That Saturday she arrived at a cozy, sun-filled house with balloons tied to the porch railing. Mira ran out to greet her, wearing a sparkly purple dress and the biggest smile Clara had ever seen. Inside, the living room was transformed. Streamers, gifts, laughter. Evan looked different too, more relaxed, in jeans and a soft sweatshirt. His eyes lit up when he saw Clara. "She's talked about you every day," he said. "You made a bigger impact than you know." Clara knelt beside Mira, helping her unwrap a gift. Mira leaned in and whispered, "This is the best birthday ever." Later, as cake was served, Evan stood beside Clara and said, "You're part of our story now." Clara turned toward him. "And you're part of mine." They didn't define what it was between them. They didn't need to. It was already written in shared moments, trust, and the pure joy of a little girl's celebration. A sudden summer rainstorm rolled in that evening, catching everyone off guard. The children squealed with delight and danced on the porch while the adults pulled blankets inside. Clara and Evan stood near the door, watching Mira laugh in the rain, spinning in circles with outstretched arms. "Déjà vu," Clara said with a smile. Evan chuckled. Only this time no broken car, no desperation, just gratitude. She glanced up at him. "Would you have told me who you were eventually?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But when I saw how you treated us without knowing, it reminded me of something my wife used to say. People show you who they are when there's nothing in it for them." Clara nodded. "That's exactly how I felt about you." There was a pause, the kind that hums with truth. The rain continued to fall outside, but neither of them moved. Then Evan reached for her hand, slowly, gently. She didn't pull away, and in that small gesture they both understood something unspoken. Some stories begin in the rain, but the real ones take root in the quiet after the storm. Weeks later, the company officially announced Clara's promotion, not just as co-lead but as director of a major new division Evan was forming. The announcement surprised many, but those who had watched her rise understood. Clara was thoughtful, ethical, and collaborative, and she had the trust of the one person who mattered most. But more than that, Clara had begun to believe in herself. She'd grown into the space life had quietly prepared for her, not with fanfare but with quiet courage. She and Evan remained close, still undefined in labels, but stronger in connection. There were dinners now, walks in the park with Mira, inside jokes and soft moments. One evening, Mira crawled into Clara's lap and asked, "Do you think stars smile when we're happy?" "I think they do," Clara whispered, pressing her cheek to the girl's forehead. And across the room, Evan met Clara's eyes and smiled, one filled with knowing and peace. No grand declarations, just trust, growth, and a bond that was deeper than either had imagined that rainy night when she opened her door to two strangers. A year later, Clara stood at the same doorway where it had all begun. Rain was falling again, soft and rhythmic. Mira was asleep upstairs, now 7 and still full of wonder. Evan was in the kitchen preparing tea. Clara stepped out onto the porch, letting the cool drops splash her face. She looked up, remembering that first knock, the uncertainty, the choice, the warmth that had followed. Behind her, Evan joined her and wrapped a light blanket around her shoulders. "You still think opening that door was crazy?" he asked. She smiled. "Best decision I ever made." "Me too." They stood in silence, listening to the rain, wrapped in shared history. No longer strangers, no longer bound by the past, just a family, not by blood but by choice. And it all began because one woman didn't ask for credentials, didn't weigh the risks. She just saw a little girl shivering and a father doing his best. She opened her door, and in doing so, opened a future none of them could have planned. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion change the course of a life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories of kindness, courage, and unexpected human connection are just a click away.